Hello, it is Stephanie and Michael here with a discussion on the healing process today. So we had some Facebook Live difficulties, right, Michael?
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't know what happened, but I couldn't get you like joined with me. We couldn't actually talk to each other.
Yep. And then I tried it, and that also failed. And so we kind of resigned ourselves to recording a Zoom video and sharing it later.
Yep.
So bear with us. We're just asking technology to cooperate with us today. All that benevolent artificial intelligence, please have our back and don't, protect our internet from getting interruptions, I guess, 'cause that can happen. Okay. So you and I kind of came into it with a general idea of what we wanted to talk about, but we wanted the organic flow as well. So where do you want to start?
Well, what are some of the common themes that you're really noticing right now when it comes to your own healing process and what you're seeing with other people? I know we're both kind of branching out a little more and involving ourselves in other people's processes as well, not necessarily in taking any kind of ownership for that process, but just kind of like observing and supporting. And I think we both have noticed a lot of things that are very similar with ourselves and with those people that we're interacting with as well. So what have you been noticing?
And I like what you said real quick, because I like to have the disclaimer up front of a few things. And one is that, like you said, I like to think of myself as not a healer, but an inspirer of healing, as someone who can hold the space for healing. And with that, the only person that I'm taking the self-responsibility for is myself. And my goal is to always create space for others to have those processes themselves, to have that safe space where they can come for that. And that whatever, I'm sharing my experience, and the things and the tools that I've learned. So I say that, but I also encourage everyone, they have to decide for themselves what resonates with them and what doesn't. Doing research, checking things out for themselves. So, making sure that I say that before we get started, so that people understand the platform where we're both coming from, because I think you share the same principles when it comes to healing space.
Yeah, I think it's important to respect people's processes and not to try to influence them too much. A lot of these things you have to come to on your own. You have to make these realizations on your own. But most of the people I've been involved with myself really seem to be struggling in relationships more than anything, familial and romantic relationships. A lot of them are also struggling when it comes to careers and myself too. These are things that I've noticed with myself too. I struggle a lot with connection with other people and feeling fulfilled in my career and feeling like I'm doing something that is as meaningful to me and as prosperous for me as it is for whoever's above me. And I think a lot of us are just kind of realizing that our day-to-day lives are not they're not sustaining us anymore. We can't keep pretending that everything is okay. It's really it's really becoming obvious to us that changes have to be made.
I 100% agree. One of the ways that I like to talk about it is that it is harder and harder to ignore what is being presented to us, especially when it comes to the trauma and the wounding that we carry. And our closest relationships with other people are going to be those mirrors and those triggers for us as an opportunity to heal ourselves. And the impact of ignoring that, or the consequences, if you want to call it that, are less and less forgiving these days. So, I mean, it's as if our greater beings are really trying to and wanting to come in and be expressed in the world. And we've had this expansion of awareness and consciousness for some people, not for everyone, as we know, because this can be part of our dilemma and part of our frustration. But it is, the universe is presenting a very auspicious time for us to be deep in the healing work. And if you're in the flow of the healing work, if you allow yourself to go there and really face yourself and really burn in that fire of transformation, things are moving very quickly. I am seeing people heal traumas at what I would call, in my perception of this lifetime, record speed. And it comes fast. Just when you get one thing healed up and faced and transformed, you get like a second to say, yay, that was awesome, I feel better. And then something else is coming. And we can't just stop interacting with people during this time, especially our most cherished relationships, right? But the realness of what's going on in those relationships as we go deeper into ourselves becomes something that you can't ignore. At least I can't.
No, absolutely. I think it's,
ignore.
I really like what you said about record speed. I noticed that same thing. It's like, it's one thing right after another. It's you feel like you closed a chapter, and then you kind of open another one right into the next step. It's very deep work. It really is. And I think sometimes we don't truly grasp that when we first start getting into the healing process. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by it, because it can feel like it's just never ending. It can feel like that wave is constantly coming, and it feels like you don't get as much of a break. But I think it's an intense time right now too. I do think, like you said, it now really is the time to be doing that work. I don't know that I fully understand it, but it seems like the energies of the world seem to be pushing most of us in that direction, to really be facing our shit and to really be kind of making some drastic changes. And that looks different for each one of us, but I think we underestimate how much our healing process really asks of us sometimes. It really says, hey, you need to all the way make some changes. You really need to do some transformations, and that looks different for all of us. But sometimes it's walking away from careers, sometimes it's walking away from family, sometimes it's walking away from relationships, sometimes it's moving to different states, sometimes it's stepping outside of our comfort zone. It's always stepping outside of our comfort zone, and it's always it always, I think a lot of us get caught up because we don't necessarily trust that stepping outside of our comfort zone is going to be rewarding to us. But that seems to be a big theme that I'm noticing within myself, for sure, and with the people around me. It's almost like we're being pushed to give a lot more than we than we really are comfortable giving. It's like we're being pushed to really dedicate ourselves to this process. It's like all or nothing.
Yes. Yeah. And it reminds me of a quote. I think it's from Neil Donald Walsh. Yeah. That says, life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And what I'm seeing happening with people is that there's a lot of people that just don't know what the heck's going on. They're not thinking about anything you or I are talking about. They're just going along with the programs that have them mesmerized. And so there's that. Then there's people that do know what's going on, and they're at first very gung-ho and ready to go, and yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm ready to transform. And then they start getting into the process, or a little deeper into the process, and begin facing themselves in a way that they haven't faced themselves before, and with a depth and with a understanding of their light and their shadow and their dark. And they, hit the ground running the opposite direction because it's too much. And the problem with that is that the way that I see things set up right now, whether it's the timing, the cycle of our sun, the universe, all of the above, is that if you don't continue to face it and go through your process, then you're getting stuck. You're going to stagnate. You're going to stay in a zone of, I would call it like lower astral energy, lower vibe energy is maybe a way to say it. And you're going to know that you're there. And that's the problem about a person like that, is you, somewhere inside of you, you already know. You went to pierce the veil, you peaked, and then you're like, oh, I can't take it, right? So and so then that becomes, something that your soul will have to work through, right? And that's a tough spot to be in, because your life may continue in drama and trauma and all those cycles, right? And it's a stuck place. And then you're missing out on the energy of that is really pushing us forward, because then there's yet another group of people who are, pulled back the veil and said, I'm doing this. I'm doing it for me, because I love myself, and for everyone in my life, I'm going to do this. But I'm doing it for me first and foremost. I'm going to be honest with myself. I'm going to take full responsibility for my existence. I'm going to reclaim my sovereignty and my authority as a co-creator in this universe. And when you do that and you go through the process and you somehow muster that courage to keep stepping forward, what you and I have talked about, the quickness of the healing, the strides, the ability to navigate the trajectory of your soul does become easier and more clear. Now, I'm not going to say it's not like walking on a tightrope. Sometimes it's like, a lot of times it's like walking on a tightrope, but that's your balance point. Some people, you might just call it 0 point. I know there's a lot of terms that are used, so I'm trying to just throw out a few examples, and then, that's where you're like on the people mover and you're going fast. It's like everybody else is walking back here and you're just like shooting forward. And that's what I'm seeing with the healing process. And I do think this is going to continue for about the next 5 years to be just an incredible time to do this kind of work. And also a time where we are reclaiming our ancestry, our bloodlines, healing those up for our entire lineage. And so there's a lot of powerful things going on there. And I know I just peppered in, topics which we could go in any direction, but it is from what I'm seeing with myself and people I work with, if you can stay, you know, at that balance point and keep moving forward, really wonderful things are unfolding, and really a great depth of knowing. For me, it's about knowing who I am and honoring who I am. And then that allows me to provide that for others. When I allow it for myself, then I can create that space for others and hold that space.
Absolutely. I think that's something that people really underestimate about the healing process. It really, accountability and responsibility are huge aspects of healing. You can't, there's like some major rules, right? You can't ignore your shit. You can't, you can't bypass your shit, and you can't, I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but you can't, we, this healing process isn't like, it's not like a pretty enjoyable thing. It's something that often is a little bit challenging. It's often a little bit, it's something you have to take care of yourself. You can't push your stuff off on other people, because that's a lot of why we're in the mess that we're in, because a lot of us have not been dealing with our own crap, and we've been pushing it off on others for so long that now there's just a big pile of it that we all have to start dealing with. And it really, that's such a key part, is really owning your own stuff, really taking responsibility, really being accountable. We definitely need support. That's a huge aspect of human interaction. We need to be heard, we need to be understood, we need to be supported, but we have to start understanding the difference between leaning on somebody and dumping on them, and just giving them our crap. We have to understand the difference between really owning our own crap and forcing someone else to take responsibility for it for us. A lot of times when we're feeling uncomfortable, when we're feeling upset, when we're feeling angry, a lot of times when we're feeling those negative emotions that we like to blame someone else for causing in us, those are key times to start looking within. Those are key times to start asking yourself some really deep questions. And it is challenging, because you have all those emotions and you have all those feelings, and you don't want to be responsible for them, right? That's what this has been about. It's somebody else dumped a lot of stuff on you, and that caused a lot of those feelings, and so it doesn't seem fair to have to deal with that. But what's the alternative? You just keep dumping it, and it keeps going and going and going. That's why I like that you mentioned this ancestral aspect. That's a huge aspect that I see within a lot of healing journeys lately, and I see that kind of on a larger scale. We're really kind of seeing society notice the importance of like natural medicines and natural remedies. We're seeing society kind of lean more towards the importance of relaxation and the importance of self-care. And we're starting to see some of the old ways come back. We're starting to see people turn more towards plant medicines. We're starting to see people understand that PTSD can be treated with something like ayahuasca, with something like mushrooms. We're starting to see that knowledge come back, and I think that's a key aspect of healing as well. As we get more in touch with our ancestral lines, and as we allow healing to take place within ourselves and to heal our bloodline, we kind of are rewarded with a little bit of that information that we've been lacking for a long time. We're really noticing a disconnect between our current selves and our ancestors. The way that we lived are totally different. The way that we treat each other, the way that we treat the earth, the way that we treat ourselves is totally different than how our ancestors lived. And so there's a lot to be learned there. There's a lot of information that we kind of thought was comical. We kind of thought was like, oh, there's a bunch of people dancing around in skirts in the jungle. They must be fools. We can go build businesses and we can go build cities. We're the smart ones, but we're starting to understand that there's a lot of wisdom in those fools that we just didn't quite grasp at the time. And that's a huge aspect of healing. It really is. And ancestral healing, it plays into the personal healing process so much. It comes later. It's not something you should overwhelm yourself with when you're first taking on your healing process, but it's something that gets very powerful as you progress. It's something that kind of helps you go as you get deeper into your healing process as well. There's a connection there. That's spirituality, I think, your connection with the world and your ancestors.
Yeah, so those were all really good points. I mean, I definitely want to second the power of plant medicine, what the earth offers us for healing. And you mentioned getting support. So, you know, plant medicine is one way. Organic eating. I think you mentioned in one of your recent videos about, you know, if you eat low vibe foods, it's going to create a low vibe cellular state inside your body. It's
Yes.
going to cause a low vibe consciousness, right? And we can see that reflected in the collective, right? And if you eat high vibe foods and you exercise and you take care of your body, the sacred vessel of your soul, by the way, and you really just start somewhere and put one foot in front of the other, right? It could be just starting with like drinking more water. I know
Yep.
people get overwhelmed when they're facing that mountain of transformation. Like, I'll never get to that point, they might think. Well, not if you don't start somewhere. And for every
Exactly.
excuse a person can throw out, you know, there's a way to nullify that excuse, because that's all it is, right? And this is what that self-responsibility, the level of self-responsibility that you and I are talking about. And for me personally, and this is reflected in my astro-psychological profile, in my astrology chart, my natal chart as well. But for me, it's about freedom. And I came to realize that if I did not take full responsibility for myself, I was never going to achieve and reach the freedom in my existence, in my life, that I want to have. And we see that reflecting in ourselves individually and on the collective. But
Yeah.
that's why during this process it is so important, whether you're transforming physically, emotionally, psychologically, psychically, all of the above at multiple times for most people, you need support. And
Yes.
you need that safe space. You need other people. You need healthy things that are going to support you. It is that self-care you mentioned is so incredibly important.
I think it starts with being real with yourself. I think it starts with really being very honest with where you are, because I think a lot of us, myself included, I think if we really, really look at where we are right now today, I think a lot of us aren't too satisfied with that. I think a lot of us aren't thrilled at the lives that we're living today. And I think that's obvious. I don't think that's too bold of a statement to make. I think we see that play out day to day on the news and in our neighborhoods and in our college classes and we see this stuff play out day to day. A lot of us are suffering. So I think it starts with being really honest with yourself. Where am I at right now? And then making decisions that slowly make you feel better, that slowly increase your vibrations. It's going to look different for all of us. You don't go from eating McDonald's every day and spending 3 hours watching depressing TV shows in the evening when you come home from work. You don't go from that to automatically doing yoga in the morning and meditating every day and eating salads for lunch and eating all organic. You just don't do that overnight. That doesn't, you just have to be realistic. This is where I'm at, and these are the steps that I take from here to get where I want to be. And you trust in the process. You let the process kind of work itself as you increase your awareness, as you really allow yourself to be more. That's where most of us are keeping ourselves stuck, is with denial. We don't really take in just how shitty a lot of what we're allowing ourselves to deal with day to day is. We kind of become numb to it, and we just don't really pay enough attention to for the changes that we need to make to be obvious for us. So as we increase our awareness, those things become more obvious to us. As we increase our awareness, that music that we listen to isn't as appealing. Those foods that we eat aren't as appealing. Those people that we hang out with aren't as appealing. We start to notice that, hey, these things aren't really that great for me. And it just starts with paying more attention to how we feel on a day-to-day basis. It starts with paying more attention to where our life is. And unfortunately, a lot of us let it get really, really bad before we're willing to take that deep of a look. But we don't have to. If we just start looking very deeply, it doesn't have to get to a point where we can't stand our lives before we start making changes. Most of us don't realize how powerful we are, because we spend so much of our time just coping with our surroundings that we don't ever really challenge ourselves to do anything about our surroundings. And let's face it, our surroundings are getting more and more intolerable every single day. So it's time for us to start paying more attention to how we live our daily lives.
Yeah. And as we mentioned before, earlier in the video, once you surrender to that process and give yourself over fully to it, to the fires of transformation, because I'm not going to say it doesn't burn, it burns. It burns it all out. Things are moving quickly. Results are coming quickly. So that's the silver lining to what we're talking about here. And one of the wounds that I see, probably a lot of our audience, folks that will watch this video, are very sensitive people. They likely have an expanded awareness already about things that are going on. And one of the wounds that I see is that there's this survivor's guilt, this fear of leaving others behind. It's kind of like being on a spiritual battlefield, and men and women to your left and right are like falling down, and you can see them cycling in their drama, and it's painful when you're watching someone you care about do that. But it's also such a situation that if you stop moving forward toward your North Star, your compass, that there are things we can do without stopping. And by not stopping our process and by moving forward into the depths of healing ourselves, we actually help those other people that are falling more than if we try to stop, turn, bend down, and in a lot of ways this translates, I know I'm using like a wartime example, but this translates to enabling people. It translates to taking away or taking from their own process. And that is not really what a creator being does. That is what a reactor being does. That's a reaction. It's not a creation. Your best way to help people is to become be the change, become that healed individual who moves forward in their sovereignty, in their authority, in their freedom, in their wisdom, in their maturity, et cetera, et cetera. And so that is one of the wounds that we have to deal with, along with what you brought up that I don't want to forget about, is that ancestral healing. So one of the mentors that I work with, he likes to say, you know, the ancestors have awoken, and they've awoken inside of us. It's in our blood codes. It's in our soul codes. And when you begin...
I feel that. Do you feel that?
Yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel that.
Yeah. And there is actually a lot of science behind these things in, you know, like mitochondrial DNA and in neurological brainwaves and consciousness studies. So you can go out and learn about that. There's a lot of people measuring or attempting to measure what we're talking about here. But yeah, the ancestors are awoken inside of us, and it's our job to align with the healing process, align with our greater beings, align with the higher force, the natural creator of the universe, and step into that alignment, and getting in that alignment, feeling that alignment within ourselves first, and then driving it into action through our will force into the world. And that is how we bring heaven to earth. That's how we make the change here, in my experience.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think I love that you brought up the relationship aspect of kind of basically outgrowing the people that are around you, kind of watching the people that you've been so close to, they're not understanding you anymore. As you become more aware of the role you play in your own suffering, you become more aware of the role that the people around you play in their own suffering. And it's very tempting for us to want to jump in and save them from that. Like, hey, I see how I was hurting myself now, so let me tell you how you're hurting yourself, and you'll fix it. But it's almost kind of a violation. It's almost kind of trespassing to really expect someone else to understand that when they just haven't gotten it yet. Like that's a very intimate realization. That's a very intimate realization that you have with yourself when you understand, when you really get it, when you really see, oh, I have been hurting myself. I have been holding myself back. I've been limiting myself. I've been telling myself things every single day that hurt me. I've been telling myself things that make me feel like a lesser being. When you start to notice those things and you start to see that, it naturally inspires change within you. I think that's a very organic part of the healing process, and I don't think that's something we should seek to force others into. I think that's something that you kind of have to come into on your own. And you're so right. It is so painful to look at the people that you love and to see them making decisions that are causing them to suffer more, or to have a harder time getting where they want to be, or to see how they're holding themselves back. It's very tempting to want to jump in there with our hero capes on. But if we think for a moment about when we've been in those positions and someone's done that to us, it's never felt loving. It's always felt like, oh, you have to change right now. You're not good enough for me. You're not good enough to make it in the world. You have to toughen up. You're not allowed to feel this. So I think we have to be very like you were saying earlier, I think we have to be very careful with the healer role and the healer title, because really all we can do is offer people information as they're willing to receive it. And all we can do is support them and love them. And loving somebody that's in a high vibrational state and loving somebody that's in a low vibrational state looks different. it's not the same type of love. Encouraging somebody who is doing the work themselves and who is really struggling is going to look different than comforting somebody who is making themselves miserable day to day. That love isn't going to look the same. So giving them the same advice isn't going to be helpful to both of them. To one of them, it's going to be detrimental, really. It's going to be making them feel worse. So I think we have to stop expecting everybody to be at the same space. We have to just really understand that this is a process that each individual has to work through, and as we take our own responsibility, we have to allow people to do that themselves. If we're trying to do this work for other people, we're robbing them of the chance to really understand their own power and to really be responsible for themselves. And so, like you said, it is enabling. It is a form of enabling. Absolutely.
But if you're on that battleground and you're down and you see that brother or sister that, you know, was down with you, get up, tend to their wounds, dust themselves off, and take a baby step, and then another one, and then another one. That's how you do it. That's how you show and create the space for others to do that. And it's, you know, it's not, I always like to say this isn't about victim shaming yourself or anyone else. We know that's one of the traps, is to, you know, victim shame yourself. That's one way not to deal with your trauma, you know, as much as being in the victim mentality is, you know, not going to transform your trauma. There's like two traps there. So again, I go back to, it's finding that center point within yourself. It's finding that tightrope that you walk, and putting one step in front of the other with courage, with bravery. And that's the difference between being self-accountable and not. I think there is that you start to realize, because you and I have talked a little bit lately about the duality of this universe, and the universe being one of contrasting expressions, and what an interesting dynamic that presents. We can see it everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And so, but that is going on within us. We've got that duality in us as well. And, you know, there's so many programs going on. I mean, compassion is a beautiful thing, you know, and you're right, though, when it's that high vibe, that high awareness levels that people operate from, acting compassionately and being able to share that with someone that is in a resonance with that, who can receive and give in that cycle, is extremely powerful, extremely powerful. And it is not enabling. You're leaving things like being, you know, it's like an alcoholic situation. You're leaving the alcohol behind. The alcoholic leaves the alcohol. The partner who was enabling leaves the enabling behind. Right? That, and sometimes in relationships, those things aren't happening at the same time for one or the other person. Just the alcoholic stopping the drinking that's only part of the equation, right? And so that's just one example. I'm trying to give an analogy of, you know, how we work this out in ourselves, because we're all mirrors for one another.
Yeah.
And another thing that I've seen very strongly in myself, because listen, what I'm saying here, I mean, I'm saying it from experience, and I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to you, as much as I'm talking to anyone who watches this video.
Yep.
Another thing, another program that I think it's important to at least touch on today is that of outside authority. Always looking always looking to someone else to save us instead of saving ourselves, whether it be through religion, the God entity, Jesus, the government period, the president, whoever, the police officer,
Boyfriends, girlfriends, mom, dad.
family members. Yes, absolutely. And that is something for, all of us to reflect on, something that I've reflected on deeply and went through some deep transformation last year with it. A lot of trauma got healed through that. Because at the end of the day, we allowed that. We allowed ourselves to give our authority over to something else.
Yeah.
Whatever it might be. And we, at the end of the day, have to face that's what we've done, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's such an important point. A lot of people find that kind of insulting when they're in more of that, painful state of the healing process, when they're more so kind of lost in their suffering, and it's when that suffering is molding them to a point where they're ready to take it on. A lot of people feel like that's kind of a messed up thing to say, that we are responsible for ourselves and that we have to be accountable for ourselves. And a lot of people feel like it's not a very compassionate message, but I think if we take a little bit of time to really look at that message for what it is, I think we can challenge ourselves to notice what an empowering message that is, because it's not so much of a blaming message. It may sound that way sometimes. It's not so much of a "this is your fault" message, or "this is something that you chose" message. It's more so like, hey, you handed your power over at some point unknowingly, so you can take it back. You have to figure out how. You have to do a little bit of work to figure out how, but that power is still yours and you can still take it back. You don't have to keep letting someone else use it. I think it's easy to hear that message and to feel personally attacked. I think it's easy to hear that message and to feel like someone's telling you did something wrong, or you chose your suffering in a way that that you shouldn't really feel as upset about it. That it's almost like telling people you should be grateful for your life experiences. And even though there's truth in that, somebody has to be at a place where they can hear that message, because the fact is it's not any kind of conscious choice. And even though it is a choice, it's a choice that you're making habitually, not consciously. So that's where that awareness comes in. That's where really increasing your awareness is so important, because as you're able to notice, hey, I'm making a choice that's not good for me, then you're able to say, hey, how can I start making a choice that is good for me? And then you're able to start making that choice. And it is a process. It doesn't happen overnight, but it comes with being able to see that. It comes with being able to look at yourself and from a place of non-judgment, but complete honesty. It comes from being able to lovingly observe where you're hurting yourself.
And so there's these programs running through psychology, and we always say they, the dark sorcerers, whatever we want to call them, whoever's in control.
Yeah, the elites.
Right. There's an understanding of some of these things, and then it gets used in very sophisticated programs against us. And, believe me, when I talk about figuring this stuff out, I mean, it's one thing for somebody to say, I don't watch the mainstream media anymore because I know it's toxic and something like that. And And it's another thing for these things to be hidden deep in your subconscious and layered, and then peeling back each of those layers and healing it and figuring out which layer has to come first. We do all kinds of things. We're very complex beings in our psyche, and there's so much in that subconscious that you're right. And yeah, see, this is where it goes back to, again, the tightrope, because you want that responsibility, you want to be able to take that responsibility, but you don't want to beat yourself up about it, because about anything or any program, because that's yet another program and trap, right? That's yet
Well, yeah.
another. And I wasn't going to talk about this card, but I'm going to talk about this High Priestess Tarot card. This is
I
from
love it.
the Rider-Waite deck. So this, a very standard popular deck, but you go to meet the High Priestess, and she's sitting, and behind her, she's sitting in your realm of consciousness, and right behind her is the veil to the subconscious. And
Yeah.
she's asking you to understand the duality of this reality before you can enter that subconscious. But once you do, you could see there's these like pomegranate fruits. The fruit of your healing awaits, like the fruit, once you do all the healing, is there for you. So, and there's much more going on in this card. I'm just now really starting to work with her, but I've also heard colleagues of mine mention about the importance of that High Priestess, that in the feminine and the womb of consciousness, because that's where everything is birthed. So now that could probably get us into a whole other topic that I don't think you and I have talked about before, about birthing into this reality and the what's going on with the sexes and the everything like that, and pitting them against each other. I mean, we can all see that happens, right? So, but
Yeah.
I want to go back to the subconscious piece, because we could probably do a whole other video on that other stuff. But it's so important to cut yourself some slack. And even though things are coming quick, and just when you get one thing healed, another comes along, do celebrate. Do go ahead and, have that little party, even if it's for a minute, even if it's for an hour, and then the next day you're like, well, here comes something else. We do have to sometimes be gentle with ourselves in this process.
Yeah, at the end of the day, spirituality is simply forming a relationship with yourself. A lot of people feel like it's this big weird thing that has to come with crystals, and it has to come with meditation, and it has to come with like religious beliefs or tarot cards or whatever. But at the end of the day, it looks different for a lot of different people, and what it boils down to is creating a relationship within yourself that's not toxic. Because like you were saying, we're all mirrors, and what we're experiencing out in this outer world is a direct mirror of what's going on internally. And I mean, if we really look around for more than a few minutes, that's kind of a scary thought. So it's really about creating peace within yourself. It's about creating love within yourself and support within yourself. And a lot of us have these critical voices in our heads, like I shouldn't have eaten that, I shouldn't have said that, I shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't have, I should be working harder, I shouldn't be enjoying this, I shouldn't spend my money on this, I can't have that coffee, I need to do this, I need to do that. And we're constantly telling ourselves can't, shouldn't. We're constantly like coming down on ourselves. And so when we really look at that, that's not a healthy internal relationship. That's not a loving internal relationship. That's a very critical relationship with yourself. That's a very stressful relationship with yourself. You're putting a lot of pressure on yourself. You feel like you have to meet these standards all the time. You can't be weak. You can't be vulnerable. You can't be whatever. You can't spend a week on the couch because life is just too hard. um, it it's about noticing those things that you say to yourself and then challenging them, and creating that healthy, loving relationship within yourself, and you start to notice these changes in your outer world as you shift those dynamics in your inner world. And I think it was really important that you brought up the subconscious. That's why I'm such a fan of the shadow work. I talk about shadow work so much. A lot of people are probably a little sick of me talking about shadow work, but I think that's one of the most important tools that spirituality has to offer, because it's all about really diving deep with yourself. It's really connecting with yourself. People who aren't too familiar with the term, it might sound a little scary. It might sound a little like dark magic type of thing, or something like that. But it's really just about observing yourself and allowing yourself the freedom of expression. It's allowing yourself to feel those emotions that you try to stop when they come up. It's about allowing yourself uh, to express yourself in ways that other people don't feel are acceptable. And it's about understanding why you feel the need to express yourself in those ways. And it gets pretty deep. The longer you stick with the practice, the deeper it can get. But I think how are you going to be responsible for yourself? How are you going to be accountable for yourself? Which we've already talked about what a key dynamic that is in healing. How are you going to do those things if you don't understand yourself? How are you going to hold yourself accountable for something if you don't understand why you're doing it? How are you going to change a toxic pattern in your life if you don't understand where it's stemming from? Shadow work is just about getting to the roots of these issues and really doing something with them, really doing something about them.
Yep, absolutely. And there's, from what I've worked with personally in my own life, and then what I've come to work with others on, that shadow work can include, inner child, inner baby healing. It can be
Huge fan of that one.
yes, that's huge. That's critical. It can include past life traumas. It can include or addressing past life situations. And one of the neat things I learned was that really what happens with a healthy minded person, so I'm not talking about someone who's super deeply traumatized, because the brain changes when that happens, right? But for the healthy person, when they experience a trauma, in their knowing, they a lot of times will create these subpersonalities that are in conflict with one another. So, they might have like the free loving, wanderless, young woman here, and then over here they have the control freak. And those two within ourselves, within our psyches, aren't getting along. And so a lot of people will notice this in their thoughts. Some people will notice it in their emotions, but in your thoughts, I hear a lot of people say, why did I think that? And then, then on the flip side, they have the opposite thought and everything in between. And so you begin hearing your inner dialogue, and you getting to the root, figure out what's going on there. What trauma was it related to? What did it cause? What fractured within you? And then how do you heal that? How do you alchemize that? And, I always like to say that alchemy, since I'm just now bringing up that word, is the art of transforming with love. And so, taking alchemy into your healing process, yes, you're working with the elements within you. You're working with the elements within you to heal. And then as we do that, you and I have both said it here, then the outside world changes. All of a sudden, we don't feel like we want that piece of pizza. For me, it's pizza. I love pizza. We don't feel like we want that pizza anymore. We don't want that soda pop anymore. We don't want to be around that really grouchy, negative coworker that, sits next to us at work. We don't want to take another insult from our father, our brother, our uncle, whoever it might be, right? I'm just giving examples of what happens in that alchemical process.
Yeah, it's I see it as just kind of like an oil and water thing. Like as your frequency rises, those lower frequencies, they kind of wear on you a little bit more. They kind of and I don't know. I kind of suspect that maybe I kind of suspect that might be a little bit more of like a middle ground thing. I kind of think if you really get up into the high vibes, that those low vibes don't necessarily pull on you as much. But I think that especially as you're going through the healing process, it's important to respect the space that you need from others or from certain situations, because it gets to a point where you start feeling like you have to choose between a higher vibe or a lower vibe. It gets to a point where it's like I can't keep tolerating this and continue to grow. I can't keep surrounding myself with this and continue to move higher. And that plays out in many different ways for many different people, but the feeling is the same. The feeling of being trapped, the feeling of being pulled down, the feeling of not being able to go any further, to thrive. That's another key part of the awareness. As you tap more into your emotions make it very clear to you what your next steps should be. Your emotions are very clear indicators of what's good for you and what's not good for you. I think, like I said in my other video, I think that many of us are so used to hanging out in kind of these lower vibe dynamics that it seems like a little bit of a fairy tale to think, oh, I can just climb these vibrations and my life will get better. But it is a lot of work. It is a lot of changing. It's a lot of holding yourself accountable. It's a lot of changing the way you talk to yourself, changing the things that you do in day to day. But I don't know. I got off on my tangent there. I do that sometimes, but I got off on my tangent. But I think awareness is one of the key elements of healing. I really do, because I think with that awareness just comes an inner knowing of what to do next. I think that's really what many of us are lacking is that awareness that helps us connect the dots between this is happening in my life constantly and these are the choices I'm making constantly. It's that awareness that bridges the gap that helps us to notice what we need to change.
Yeah, and we're able to focus, not that someone else is holding me back, but I'm holding me back.
Yep. By entertaining that other person.
Right. And I do want to just kind of bring up, you mentioned a point about like tolerating the lower vibe stuff. When you do get yourself in a place where you're clear and you've done a lot of healing and you're deep in your process. Now, this isn't to say go throw yourself in a group of toxic people and keep hanging out with them, or, stay in an abusive relationship or something that's not working. However, there is a wisdom in that letting go, in saying, okay, I am co-creating this low vibe experience, and it's keeping me back, and that's why it's intolerable with the other person or object of whatever you're not tolerant of, because you're triggered, it's you. And so when you realize that and you choose something different, and you begin and work through your healing process, you can still approach the situations and the relationships in your life with compassion, and you can be loving, but you're not there to fix, and you're not there to enable, and that is not your job. Your job is not to make whatever journey the other person has taken easier for them. They've chosen to have the journey the way they've chosen to have it, and you may think you're making it easier, but you're actually continuing prolonging it. Yeah. And so going back in the mirror and saying, okay, there's some part of me that is contributing and co-creating to what's going on. And until I own that and take responsibility for it and step forward on my own behalf with truth and with love, and honoring the situation, then yeah. And that's the dynamic of this time, what it's offering people time and again. And so, yeah, it can be, if you're fighting the process, it can be a little bit of a tug of war, a push or pull. And I think you mentioned earlier where it becomes like a pressure. You feel a pressure upon you. And a lot of times we talk about pressure in context to other people pressuring us, or a situation, or, like something at work pressuring us, but it's really us. It's the mind doing that, creating that, out of some sort of trigger of some sort of, small or large trauma or wounding that holds us back there. And that's why the healing process naturally equates to you being able to step into those higher vibes. And one of my mentors talks about it being like you navigate the solar spiral. So and if you can imagine it like your growth and evolution in the universe, let's just put it that way, that's navigating the spiral. And everybody has a different way to navigate. Some people are walking, some people are climbing, some people are crawling, some people are jumping, some people are flying, right? Everybody has a different ways to navigate that, different tools and styles. But that's where you want to be. Otherwise, you're hitting that ceiling. You're hitting that ceiling, and you can't keep going until you resolve it.
Until you resolve it.
So I know we've talked for probably about an hour now. Can you believe it? I mean, we could go on for ages.
I know, it's gone by like that.
But I want to give you a chance and me a chance to talk about what we do and where people can find us and reach us and everything. So go for it.
Well, most people know me on my page, but you can also find my tarot page, which is titled the same. It's Michael Diamond, and I share that on my page periodically. But I also admin the spiritual healing group, and I'm an admin for the Power of Now page, and Progressives in Action as well. I'm not as frequent in that group. I was in that, I admin that group and was more frequent in that group when Bernie was running the first time, and I was a lot more politically focused. I do still drop some gems in that group, but not very often. And so what I do, I guess I'm still kind of figuring that out, but tarot cards have really proven to be something that that helped me to channel my intuition, and I'm like loving challenging myself and seeing that I'm actually pretty good with them. And plant medicine, that's something I'm very passionate about. That's something I'm going to be working with more. But yeah, I'm still kind of stepping into my roles. I'm still kind of discovering them. I'm kind of new to the whole spiritual thing. I've taken on a lot. I did the ayahuasca, and I feel like it just kind of sent me into like spiritual overdrive. But just a few years ago, I was very closed-minded to all of this stuff. So I'm practicing as I learn.
That's awesome. Thank you. And my website is creatorsonthecrest.com, CREST, Creators on the Crest. And I also manage that Facebook page. And I have a private group for people that come to work with me and my colleagues there. And I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I'm not on TikTok yet, but apparently that's a thing. I got to learn that. So yeah, so you can message me in any of those places. My email is stephanie@creatorsonthecrest.com if you want to email me directly as well. So any final words for today to wrap things up?
I'm just very happy that we did this video and that you and I got the chance to really just talk one-on-one more. We share a lot with each other and we have a lot of good conversations, but it's nice to have the real time back and forth, and I don't know. I think that it's important. I'd like to encourage other people, anyone who's watching. I think it's just important right now to be like as authentic as we can, and to, even when it feels a little bit uncomfortable, to put ourselves out there and really share what we've been experiencing and what we've been talking about. That's something I haven't been extremely great about myself lately. I've definitely dove headfirst into my process, and I haven't been sharing as much. But I think it's important for us to kind of validate each other just with our own experiences, and I don't think we have to do a whole lot of work to do that. If we're just being honest and authentic, I think we kind of naturally validate each other just by sharing our own experiences. So I definitely want to do more videos with more people, especially more people in the spiritual healing group. I'm extremely interested in doing more lives with members in that group. So I just want to encourage anyone who is willing to come on and talk about their own healing process. I think there's a lot of healing in just being honest and authentic about what we go through day to day in our healing processes. So that's my final thoughts.
Absolutely. No, I agree with that 100%. I would also just encourage everyone to get support. Somehow, somewhere. Get that safe, sacred space where you can process and go through your healing. It is so important, and it's so beneficial. It's so beneficial when that space is set up in partnership, group, community, where you have that, and that very high vibe support space and support people, right? That's what everyone deserves, and it's just, make it sure that you step forward on your own behalf for that. So I would like to go live with you sometime. Since that didn't work out today, we're going to have to see what's going on with Facebook.
Yes.
I also am looking forward to doing more interviews and recordings like this. In fact, I was going to ask you, are you okay with me if I can figure out how to post it to my YouTube channel? Do you have a YouTube?
Yeah, I do. I share more of like my gaming stuff on my YouTube channel, but yeah, feel free to share on YouTube.
Yeah. Again, none of these platforms are my favorite people all the time, but they can be useful. So, um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So thank you for today. I hope, the rest of your day goes well. And to everybody watching, thank you for being in this space with us, whether, it's now, it's later, it's a year from now, you're hearing this exactly when you need to hear it. And
Absolutely.
we're just so grateful and honored. I think I could speak for both of us. We're very grateful and honored to work with the people we do, and it's an honor. It's an extreme honor um, to hold that kind of space with other people. So, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
we will
thank
go
you.
up. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you, and we will talk again soon.
Absolutely. Have a good day.